She scolded me for being late, but the truth was, I only ever showed up for her. I remember the first time I saw her again, after years of only knowing her as the teacher everyone respected. The classroom felt strangely quiet that evening, the kind of silence that makes you notice every small detail, the faint smell of chalk dust, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the rows of empty desks that once seemed so alive. I pushed the door open a little too late, as always. She was already there, sitting at her desk, papers neatly stacked beside her. She looked up over her glasses with that sharp but gentle expression she had perfected over years of teaching. Her voice carried the same authority I remembered, though softer now, touched with weariness. "You're late again," she said, her tone half scolding, half amused. I couldn't help but smile, leaning against the doorway as if I had all the time in the world. "But always on time for you," I replied, the words slipping out more easily than I intended. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something she tried to hide by adjusting her glasses and lowering her gaze back to the papers. But it was there, a mix of surprise and the faintest curve of a smile. I walked in, the sound of my footsteps echoing across the wooden floor. The desk lamp cast a warm glow across her face, softening the lines of maturity that time had etched with grace. She was still beautiful, not in the youthful way of girls my age, but in a way that carried depth, confidence, patience, a quiet strength that made you want to lean closer. As I slid into the chair across from her, I noticed the details I hadn't before, the way a loose strand of her dark hair fell near her cheek, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the way she held her pen as though it was an extension of her thoughts. She tried to keep the conversation about tutoring, about the lesson, about everything professional. But her eyes betrayed her now and then, lingering a little too long, softening when I spoke. I wondered if she realized how carefully I watched her, how much I noticed. There was a pull between us, unspoken but undeniable. Not rushed, not inappropriate, just, there. Hanging in the air like a question neither of us dared to answer yet. And as the evening light faded through the tall classroom windows, I realized something: I didn't care if I was late to everything else. For her, for this moment, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The lesson ended the way it always did, with her closing the book gently, stacking her papers into a neat pile, and telling me I should head home before it got too late. But I didn't move. Instead, I leaned back in the chair, watching her scribble notes in the margins of a test paper, the tip of her pen tapping lightly as if the rhythm itself kept her company. The rain outside had started to fall harder, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. The room felt smaller, warmer, more intimate than any classroom should. "Do you ever take a break?" I asked, tilting my head as I studied her. She gave a short laugh, not looking up. "Not when there are 30 essays waiting for me. You'd think after all these years I'd get used to the workload." Her voice carried a hint of exhaustion, but also something else, something quieter, like loneliness. Without thinking, I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk between us. "Then let me help," I said. She finally looked at me, her brow lifting as though the idea itself was ridiculous. "You? Helping me grade papers? Why not?" I shrugged, trying to hide the fact that I just wanted a reason to stay. "I know the basics. A wrong answer's a wrong answer. I can handle that much." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind that made my chest tighten. She pushed a paper toward me. "Fine. Let's see how you do." I bent over the paper, pretending to take it seriously, though my attention was pulled constantly toward her. The way her hair fell forward when she leaned down. The way her laughter sounded softer when it wasn't meant for the whole class, only for me. Our hands brushed once as we reached for the same paper. It was nothing, an accident. But the warmth of her skin against mine lingered longer than it should have. She pulled her hand back quickly, clearing her throat, her eyes dropping back to her work. Outside, the storm pressed harder, the windows rattling under the weight of the wind. Inside, though, the glow of the lamp, the soft scratching of our pens, and the unspoken connection weaving between us created a strange sense of peace. I caught her glancing at me once, when she thought I wasn't looking. A glance that held curiosity, maybe even something more. She quickly looked away, but it was enough. Enough to keep me there longer than I should have stayed. Enough to make me realize that tonight, it wasn't the rain keeping me from leaving. It was her. By the time we finally packed up, the clock had already slipped past 9. The rain hadn't let up, if anything, it had grown heavier, drumming steadily against the tall classroom windows. She gathered her papers, sliding them neatly into her leather bag, and gave me that teacher's look, the one that carried both authority and concern. "You should get going," she said gently. "Your family will worry." I shook my head, glancing outside at the rain cascading in sheets under the dim glow of the parking lot lamps. "Not in this storm. You'll be walking out there too, won't you?" She hesitated, caught off guard. For all her composure, there was a moment where she looked smaller, almost vulnerable. I stood and slipped off my jacket, holding it out to her. "At least let me walk you to your car." Her lips parted as if to argue, but instead she accepted the jacket, draping it over her shoulders. It looked oversized on her, but in a way that made her seem softer, less untouchable. We stepped into the hallway, the flickering fluorescent lights casting pale shadows as our footsteps echoed on the tile floor. By the time we reached the doors, I opened my umbrella and held it above us. The space under it was small, forcing us close enough that our shoulders brushed as we stepped into the rain. The storm wrapped around us immediately, the hiss of water hitting pavement, the scent of wet asphalt and earth rising in the cool night air. She clutched her bag close to her chest, and I noticed her shiver as a gust of wind swept past. Without thinking, I shifted closer, my arm brushing against hers. She didn't move away. In fact, when a sudden crack of thunder split the night, she instinctively reached out, her hand finding my arm. Just for a second. But long enough for me to feel the press of her fingers, the unspoken need behind such a small gesture. The parking lot stretched before us, nearly deserted. The yellow glow of the street lamps reflected in puddles, turning them into scattered mirrors. Our footsteps splashed quietly, her heels clicking softly against the wet concrete. I didn't speak. Neither did she. There was no need. The silence between us was louder than words, charged with something we both felt but refused to name. By the time we reached her car, she let her hand slip away from my arm, almost reluctantly. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes holding mine for just a moment longer than polite. And in that stolen glance, I realized the rain wasn't the only thing making it hard to breathe. She fumbled with her keys, the rain still beating down around us, but instead of slipping into the driver's seat immediately, she paused. The storm was relentless, and for a moment she looked at me as though debating whether to send me away or let me stay. Then, with a quiet sigh, she unlocked the passenger door. "Get in," she murmured. "At least until the rain slows." I didn't hesitate. The car was warm, the faint hum of the heater already fogging the windows. The sound of the rain softened inside, a muffled rhythm that wrapped the space in an odd cocoon of calm. For the first time that night, there were no empty desks, no hallway echoes, no walls between us. Just her and me, caught in a pocket of quiet time. She sat with her hands folded loosely on the steering wheel, her shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. She was always poised, always in control, but here, in the soft glow of the dashboard lights, she looked human. "You know," she said after a long silence, her voice low, almost hesitant, "people think teaching is all about discipline and patience. But most days, it feels like I'm just holding everything together with my own two hands." Her admission caught me off guard. The woman who had always seemed unshakable now sounded fragile, worn down by the weight she carried. I watched her profile, the way her eyes softened as she stared through the rain-streaked windshield. I leaned back, my tone steady. "You don't have to always be the strong one, you know." She gave a short laugh, but it wasn't mocking, it was weary. "Strong is the only way they'll take me seriously." If I falter even a little, I stop being their teacher. I stop being enough. Her words lingered in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Without realizing it, I shifted closer, lowering my voice. To me, you've never been just a teacher. She turned her head then, eyes meeting mine. There was a flash of conflict there, surprise, caution, and something softer hiding beneath it all. For the first time, she didn't look away. I could feel the tension between us, not sharp or uncomfortable, but fragile, like glass that might break if pushed too hard. The silence stretched, filled with the quiet hum of the heater and the steady beat of the rain. For once, she wasn't my teacher and I wasn't her student. We were just two people, sitting in a car, daring to admit we were both searching for something more than the roles the world had given us. The storm showed no mercy outside, a steady curtain of rain blurring the world beyond the glass. Inside her car, though, the air felt suspended, like time itself had decided to slow down just for us. She sat quietly, her fingers drumming faintly on the steering wheel, lost in thought. I didn't speak. I just watched her, how the soft light from the dashboard illuminated her face, how her eyes seemed far away but her presence filled every inch of space between us. There was a fragility about her now, so different from the woman who commanded entire classrooms. She turned slightly, her gaze flickering toward me. There was something she wanted to say, I could see it in the parting of her lips, the hesitation in her eyes, but instead she exhaled, her shoulders relaxing in a rare surrender. "Thank you," she murmured at last, her voice so quiet it almost disappeared beneath the patter of rain. "For what?" I asked gently. "For staying," she whispered, her hand moving as if by instinct. She reached across the console, her fingertips brushing against mine. It was such a small gesture, so brief at first, that I might have missed it if not for the way it sent a shiver through me. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. Her hand settled lightly over mine, cool against the warmth of my skin, the contact so delicate yet so deliberate. The world outside was chaos, wind, rain, thunder rolling far in the distance, but inside, there was only that touch. Her fingers didn't squeeze, didn't cling, but lingered just long enough to make it clear, this wasn't an accident. Her breath caught faintly, and she turned her face slightly, as though ashamed of her own boldness. I watched her, my heart pounding, wanting to say something but knowing words would only break the fragile magic of the moment. So instead, I let the silence hold us, let her hand rest against mine as though it belonged there. Finally, after what felt like forever but was really only seconds, she withdrew her hand, folding it back into her lap. The loss of warmth was immediate, but the memory of it, her skin, the tremor of hesitation, the unspoken confession in her touch, stayed with me. She didn't look at me again right away. But I caught the faintest curve of her lips, a secret smile that she tried to hide by turning her face back toward the windshield. And in that smile, I realized something, she was just as afraid of this as I was. But she wasn't running anymore. Not tonight. The silence after her touch lingered, heavier than any words could have been. I could still feel the echo of her fingers against mine, the quiet electricity that had passed between us. She sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the windshield as the rain carved glistening rivers across the glass. Then, finally, she spoke. Her voice was softer than before, and there was a tremor in it, barely there, but enough to make my chest tighten. "This can't happen," she whispered. Her words were firm, but her tone betrayed her. It wasn't certainty I heard, it was fear. Fear of the unspoken rules, of what people would think, of what lines we were dangerously close to crossing. She was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. I turned toward her, studying the curve of her profile in the dim light. The stern teacher was gone, in her place sat a woman wrestling with her own heart. "Then let it just stay here," I said gently, my voice steady. "In this moment. No rules, no expectations. Just, you and me." Her eyes flicked to mine at that, wide and searching, as though she was looking for a reason to pull away, but finding none. There was a war in her gaze, logic against longing, discipline against desire. And for once, desire seemed to be winning. She drew in a sharp breath and looked away again, her hands gripping the steering wheel though the car never moved. "You don't understand," she murmured. "If people found out, if anyone even suspected, I don't care about anyone else," I interrupted softly. "I care about you. Right here. Right now." Her lips parted as though to argue, but no words came. Instead, she just sat there, caught in the tension that neither of us could escape. The car felt impossibly small, the air charged with something that made it hard to breathe. For a long, fragile moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned her face back to me. Her eyes softened, and the sternness that had once defined her melted into something I had never seen before, something tender, vulnerable, and achingly human. A faint, almost reluctant smile curved at the edges of her lips, the kind of smile that spoke of surrender rather than victory. And in that smile, I saw her decision. Not a leap, not yet. But a step. A quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it was real. The rain outside eased into a drizzle, but inside her car, the storm had only just begun. For a while, neither of us spoke. The storm had quieted to a soft drizzle, raindrops slipping gently down the glass like the night itself was calming, as if it had been raging only to bring us here, to this fragile stillness. She leaned back against her seat, her shoulders heavy with the weight of all the things she couldn't say. I could see it in the way her fingers tapped restlessly against her lap, in the way her breath came unevenly, as though caught between relief and fear. Then, with a sigh so faint it barely rose above the hum of the heater, she let her head tip sideways, resting lightly against my shoulder. The moment stole the air from my lungs. I froze, not wanting to disturb it, not wanting to give her any reason to pull away. Her hair brushed against my jaw, carrying the faint scent of rain in something warmer, something unmistakably her. "I shouldn't," she murmured, her voice muffled, weary. "You don't have to," I whispered back. "Just, stay." Her body relaxed at that, a slow surrender. The tension in her shoulders softened, her breath steadied, and in the quiet rhythm of it I could feel the trust she rarely offered anyone. My arm moved on its own, wrapping gently around her, pulling her just close enough that she would know, she wasn't alone. The world outside faded. The drizzle against the windshield became a lullaby. Time itself seemed to pause, holding the moment in its hands, unwilling to let it break. I didn't need more. Not tonight. Just her presence beside me, the weight of her head on my shoulder, the warmth of her leaning into me. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a promise. But it was real. And sometimes, that's more powerful than any words. She shifted slightly, her cheek brushing against my chest. "You make it too easy to forget the rules," she whispered. I smiled faintly, my chin resting lightly against her hair. Maybe that's because rules were never meant to cage the heart. She didn't answer, but her silence was full, not empty. Full of things she wasn't ready to say, but things I already knew. The rain slowed to nothing, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. And there, in the stillness of her car, in the warmth of that fragile closeness, we found a peace neither of us had been looking for, but both of us desperately needed. It wasn't the end of our story. But it was the beginning of something we could no longer deny.